These are the paint colors I'll be using for today's floral: Burnt Umber, Permanent Rose, Sap Green, Ultramarine Blue, Dioxazine Purple, and Payne's Gray. You can find a list of these colors in the video description, so feel free to pause the video while you gather your paint colors. You don't have to be exact, you just want to get somewhere close. These are the supplies I'll be using for today's painting. If you've painted with me before, it's all very standard. Also, in the video description is a line drawing that you can download and print at home. I want you to print it to the scale you plan on painting it. And behind the line drawing, you can apply graphite all over, position it in place, and tape it down so it doesn't shift. Then, with the use of a ballpoint pen or pencil, you're going to trace the line drawing, and it's going to push that graphite onto your watercolor paper. You can then just tear your line drawing off and set it aside. Now for today's subject, we're going to need some masking fluid, and we are going to protect the flower before we paint the background. Now, masking fluid, when put on top of pencil lines, it tends to remove the pencil lines when you lift it up later. So I recommend just taking a moment to trace your pencil lines so they're a little on the darker side, so that when you lift up that masking fluid, you don't run the risk of completely losing everything and having to redraw it. So for this, I like to use a 4H drawing pencil just because it's a harder graphite, so it doesn't remove as easily. And I'm just going to go through and trace where some of these buds are. So hopefully when I remove the masking fluid later, I'll still be able to have some lines to reference. Since we're working with dark colors today, I don't have to worry about my pencil lines showing through. It will not bother me. Once you've traced your pencil lines, then we're going to apply our masking fluid. This is the brand I'm going to be using today. And in order to protect my tools, I'm going to use a little bit of Dawn dish soap. I'm going to use a small #2 round, and I'm going to layer it in soapy water to protect the bristles. And I'm now going to basically color in my entire flower. And if we get sloppy with our masking fluid when we take it up later or remove it later, we're going to regret it and be disappointed in the results. So don't rush this step. Take your time. If you need to take a break, take a break. But how you apply masking fluid will affect your end results. So for those of you that aren't familiar with masking fluid, this liquid will dry fast and it will resist any paint. So it has kind of like this plastic rubbery texture when it dries. And it will keep the paint out when we're doing the background, so we don't have to worry about it, which is really nice. Now I've gone a short distance. I need to re-rinse my brush in soapy water to add an additional layer of protection. Masking fluid is notorious for ruining brushes if you don't protect your brush. We just need to kind of color in this flower. Remember to take your time on this step, especially on your outer edges. That way you're not disappointed when you remove it later. It will make a difference. So just slow down. Anywhere where the masking fluid seems like it might be a little too thin, I encourage you to do just a second layer just in case, because we're doing really dark, bold colors in our background, and we hate for them to show up on your flower and affect your flower later. Now I'm only bringing this masking fluid down about 2/3 of the way because I want the bottom of the stem to kind of blend in with the background. Now I rinsed my brush really, really good. Made sure to get all the masking fluid and dish soap out of it. And while the masking fluid is drying, I'm going to take this moment to mix our background colors. So I'm going to have at least 5 colors in the background. So I'm going to be using my large number 10 round to carry clean water from my water cup over to my paint palette in at least 5 or 6 wells. When I get my brush to the palette, I drag it across the rim to help encourage it to release some water. Now keep in mind, we don't want a lot of water because we plan on having really dark, vibrant colors. So one of the dark colors I'm going to be using is Payne's Gray. It looks very similar to a black, but it has a little bit more of a blue hint to it. The next color I'm going to be using involves Payne's Gray, but we are going to add some purple to it. So I'm going to drag my brush across the rim and I am going to get some purple dioxazine, I think is what it's called. I never know how to pronounce it, but it's a very dark, dark purple. I'm going to rinse my brush, move on to the next color. This time it's going to be a Sap Green with Ultramarine blue. Going very dark here. So lots of blue, lots of pigment. You just want to make sure your color is still wet and watery. You don't want it thick and goopy. This isn't acrylics. Got to embrace that water. I'm going to get some of that purple dioxazine color. You could tell I'm not very confident in how to say that. I'm just having that purple by itself. And let's see, I'm going to add, let's go with some brown. So burnt umber. But I'm going to be adding some purple to it. I love adding purple to brown. I think it just makes it really, really pretty. And then lastly, I am going to be adding a little bit of permanent rose. So we're going with a vibrant pink here. But I want this color watered down. I don't want it to be as dark as the others. So just a softer pastel color. All right, so I am going to test out these colors, and if you need to pause the video while you get your colors ready, please do so rather than being stressed. So the first color I have is just Payne's Gray by itself. Okay, and I need to go darker than that. I want it to look pretty close to black. So get enough pigment in your mixture. That's better. The next color is Payne's Gray with the purple. Nice and dark. Next color is Sap Green with the Ultramarine blue. Nice and dark again. And then we have the purple by itself. We have the brown with the purple. Very dark. And then we have, lastly, some pink. All right, those are the colors we're going to use in the background. And you know what? Leave it to me. I'm going to add one more color. Why not? So I am going to do more of just ultramarine blue to tap on top of some of these colors. So it won't be blue in the background because I'll layer it on top of others and mix colors with it. But we're going to go with some ultramarine too. All right. So I'm now going to use clean water all over the background now that the masking fluid is dry. So I'm going to be pretty heavy-handed. If you enjoyed this tutorial, please hit that subscribe button and give me a thumbs up. So I have plenty of water on my paper now. It's very glossy, but there are not puddles. Okay, if there's puddles, you need to soak those up or it's going to cause frustrations and it's going to dilute your dark colors. It's going to lighten them up drastically. So get rid of that excess water, especially if it's puddling on your outside corners of your block or in the low points of your paper. Because we want a dark, dramatic background. And if you have too much water on your paper, it's just going to make everything lighter and softer. So I'm going to start with the permanent rose color in this upper left corner. Below that, I'm going to go with the purple. After that, I'm going to go with a little bit of blue. Don't worry, we're not keeping a rainbow. As much as I love rainbows, the background will look different. All right. I'm now going to use that dark Payne's Gray, and I am going to go all over the bottom half of this painting. Notice the pace that I'm painting. I'm not dilly-dallying. This has to get done in a certain time, otherwise the paper will dry on me. All right, I'm going to get some of the dark greens in. Just dragging those greens up through the black. Not even worrying about it. Just trying to create some different shapes. I can grab some of that dark brown There's no real rhyme or reason. I am trying to kind of come up from the ground floor, so that if there is a brush stroke or shape that's a result of it, then maybe it'll at least read like some sort of plant-like shape or texture. Continuing with that real dark purple. Getting some of that ultramarine blue to run through in some parts. And before I consider this background done, I just need to make sure to soak up puddles of paint. Make sure my paint extends over all areas of the paper if I want solid coverage. So I'm just drying my brush and soaking up the puddling. Puddles love to hang out in the low points of your paper, so just take a moment to soak some of those up. You don't have to press down hard, just get the top surface of the puddle. If you press down too hard, then you remove the paint as a whole, and that's not what we want to do. I'm going to get a little bit more of that dark green. Rinsing my brush, dabbing my sponge firmly, and I'm just kind of going along this edge of the ultramarine blue just to soften it, so I don't have too much texture there. Just trying to create some interesting shapes. Staying on top of any puddles. If I need to re-establish some of my greens before I hit it with the blow dryer, I can do that. All right, I feel like that works. I'm now going to hit this with the blow dryer before removing the masking fluid. Now that everything is completely dry, I want to get some water on my palette for some Sap Green. I'm going to add the smallest amount of ultramarine blue to it, but I don't want it too dark. And I'm going to take this wet brush with this Sap Green and I'm going to create some lighter leaf textures in the background. And I can just wet my brush, and with some firm pressure, I can start to lift out some lighter green leaves. I rinse my brush once in a while and drag through that leaf shape with firm pressure. I just want it to be light enough to see against those dark background colors. And I'm going to do this a couple times. So wet brush, I'm going to go a little bit higher than the flower with this next one, but I'm going to come down towards the stem. So if I run into the previous one, that's okay. I'm going to make sure to get some of my sap green in there. I try to take my time at the ends of the leaf. And now for me personally, I feel like this right side is kind of lacking something. So I'm going to do the same thing on the right side. Just going to take some clean water and I'm going right off the page here. I just want something to kind of break apart the shape to give a little something on this side. I'm going to get some of that green in. And I now have to hit this with the blow dryer once more. Now I'm going to use a square stiff brush and I'm going to do some lifting on the leaves that I just painted so I can identify a light source just to kind of make them glow a little bit more. So I have my brush wet. I use my fingers like a squeegee across the metal ferrule so I don't have any droplets of water. And I'm going to have a paper towel in hand. I am going to go against the top edge of the leaf on the right. And with the water on my brush, I'm going to start lifting that top edge. Once I see paint starting to come up, I can dab with firm pressure using my paper towel. Now I don't want to muscle this. There's Payne's gray in my background and that's a staining color, so it's not going to come up to a perfect white. I just want a little bit of a glow on the edge. And I'm now going to do the same thing on this far left leaf. So I'm going to just rotate my paper for a better angle for my hand. Again, it's not about muscle, just letting the water do the work. Don't press hard, don't tear your paper. Just move your wet brush along that same edge, and eventually the color will start to lift from the paper. So now that adds kind of this nice glow. And I can now just use some of that sap green to tint that lighter edge. I can do the same thing with the opposite side. I'm just using that sap green. And I now have to hit this with the blow dryer once more, but then we can remove the masking. I'm now going to use a rubber cement pickup to remove the masking fluid. You don't need a rubber cement pickup, you can just use your fingers, but some masking fluid can be stubborn to come up, especially if there's some dried paint splatters on top. So I find that the rubber cement pickup just simplifies my life. Hopefully there's still some pencil lines present when I remove this. And there are, which is great. If you enjoyed this tutorial, please hit that subscribe button and give me a thumbs up. All right, now that the masking fluid is off, I'm going to use my square brush again to do some lifting. I want to lift just part of the stem here. So I want to kind of soften the transition between the background greens and the stem that had the masking fluid. So I just kind of lifted that transition there where the white paper met with the background paint. And then once I get color on this later, it's not going to be as obvious. So meanwhile, I am going to go ahead and mix a very light purple. So I'm using that Dioxazine Purple, and I'm going to add some Ultramarine blue, so it's a little bit on the blue side. But I'm going to water it down so it looks more like a pastel. So to show you what color I'm working with, this is the color. So don't go too dark, just keep it nice and light. And I'm now just going to start at the very top of the flower and bring my color down. If there's any pencil lines that you feel like, ooh, it might get hard to see after I got some color in here, just take a moment to draw some of those pencil lines so you don't have to worry about it. So I'm just going through, adding some of those pencil lines. So I'm confident that after I add this paint, I'll still know where on earth I'm at. All right, so I'm starting at the top, and I just want to get a base color in. So I'm not too worried about individual buds. I just want to kind of fill this in. So I'm going to start at the top. And right now my color looks very similar to the background at the top. So I'm just going to dab with a paper towel to pick up just a tint of that color so it doesn't look the same. And once I move past the top, I don't go back and play with the color. I just kind of let it be. And I just continue moving in one direction with my paint. I am glad I added those pencil lines because it would have been hard to see without that. So while that base color is drying on the purple flower, I'm going to go ahead and add some color to this forward leaf here. I'm just working with Sap Green, painting wet on dry. Once I have it filled in, I can grab some of the dark green and just on the left edge, just darken that up a bit. And I'm just going to let that dry. If you feel like some of your dark greens are creeping into that right side where you want it lighter, just use a clean, dry brush, drag against that right edge, and it'll help kind of pick up some of those dark greens and brighten it up. So while these two areas are drying, I am going to mix some colors for this stem. I want kind of a darker maroon brown. So I'm just going to add a little bit more pink to my brown and purple mixture on my palette since it's already there. I'm going to check on my purple here. It is already dry, and I'm going to go ahead and paint the stem. Now the stem is going to go from a black to a really dark purple to kind of that, warm brown color. So I'm just going to work my way from the top to the bottom, and I'm not going to go backwards. To confidently do this and not accidentally hit my flower buds, I'm going to grab my small #2 round. And I'm just starting up near the flower. Once I get down a short ways, I'm going to be switching to my purple that is without the Payne's gray. Once I get down a short distance, now I'm going to switch to that warm brown. I didn't even rinse my brush. I'm just going for it. Once I get down to the leaves, I'm going to just paint right over top of them with this warm brown. So I'm going to continue the width of my stem down until it's off the page. Trying to keep the width consistent, which is not always easy. And I just need to let that stem dry. So now I can look at my flower blossom and I can start adding details. So one of the things I want to note is at the very center of each part of this blossom, it's a little bit more pink. So I'm going to grab this pink color and right at the very center of some of these blossoms, I'm going to add some pink. And I'm doing that now so that I am mindful of them and I don't accidentally cover them up. So you can just kind of paint them kind of like a little star if you want, but they have some texture to them. And they don't all need to look the same. Depending on the angle and direction of the bud, it's going to change the location of where the pink is. So just don't go on autopilot. Occasionally pause and look at your reference photo. It's there to help you. Now that we have those light pinks in, I'm going to focus on the negative space between the buds. This is the hard part, okay? You want to work with a small brush with a good point that you can depend on. And I really want you to go an extra step and tap a sponge or paper towel to wipe away the excess so you can get small lines. I'm going to start at the bottom here, and I want to find where these blossoms kind of meet up, and I'm holding my brush very vertical. So I'm able to get these real thin wispy lines, and I'm just barely touching, the longest hair on my brush to the paper. And this is helping me get some thin lines to indicate the gaps in the blossom. And I'm using my Payne's gray for this. So we're just painting the negative space, barely touching your brush to your paper so you can get those real thin lines. If working on a 5x7 scale is too small, you can always work larger and it will make these shapes much easier to paint. So make it easier on yourself. I feel like I need some binoculars or something to see what I'm doing here. It's amazing what a little negative space will do to your flower. It's very, very helpful. You just got to take it slow. If you enjoyed this tutorial, please hit that subscribe button and give me a thumbs up. Once you get close to the top of your blossom, I want you to rinse that black or Payne's gray out of your brush, and I want you to switch to the ultramarine blue. But I want you to water it down a bit. Don't go in with like a really vibrant blue. Water it down. And from there, you can continue your negative space up towards the top. But switching to that ultramarine blue will help indicate that your blossom is kind of nearing the light source. Now that we have the negative space painted, we are going to focus on adding some texture and value to the blossoms. So I am going to get some of my purple with the ultramarine blue, and I want to water this color down so it's not too dark. Something right about there is probably plenty. And I want to imagine that the light source is coming down from the top, okay? So we want to add some color on the underside. So being mindful of the pink centers, I'm just adding a glaze on the underside of each blossom. And I just want to always be mindful of the contour that these blossoms have, giving them a curve. So basically, on the lower side of every blossom, we're adding a glaze of color for a shadow. Keeping in mind, if there's a blossom overhanging that one on the top, we got to give a little bit of the shadow at the top too. So it kind of messes with your eyes a little bit, but just look at your reference photo to help guide you and just take it one blossom at a time. I find it really helpful to put my finger on the blossom as I'm painting it so I don't get lost. It's really easy for yourself to get lost when everything starts looking the same. Trying to stay out of that little pink center. If there's a blossom above where you're working, there should be a shadow on top. As we get towards the top, there's less and less shadows, so just be minimal with it. I'm now going to get a darker pink on my brush so I can kind of get a little bit more detail into the center of those flowers. But I'm going to add a little bit of that dark purple to it so it's even darker still. And I'm going to start on the bottom because up here it needs time to dry. So I'm just going to do some texture, not in the center of the pink, but along the outer edge. And I'm just going to try and kind of create some dotted texture without going in the absolute middle. Now I'm going to get a little bit more of that watered down ultramarine blue. It's just a really light color, nothing too crazy. And I'm just going to keep pushing the values of a few of the shadows. So anywhere where I feel like the contrast is lacking, I'm just going to come in and do another glaze in that area. And it's not about going everywhere. It's about finding two parts of the blossom that are kind of camouflaged into each other and choosing one to darken up. Right now, my paint that I'm applying is sitting in a puddle, so it's looking a lot darker than it actually is. So it can be kind of deceiving. If I want to soak up the puddles, I just dry my brush and then tap the top surface of those puddles so it's easier to understand what it's actually going to look like. I'm now going to add some Payne's gray to that blue. And just in a couple areas, I'm going to push the shadows darker still. I'm just keeping my paintbrush feather light. And this real dark shadow is really going to be on the very bottom in just a few select areas. So it's not something that we're doing everywhere. All right. And that should be it for this particular flower tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it. I'd love to see your finished paintings, and do leave a comment, because if you don't, I have no idea if I'm on track. I hope you have a fantastic week.